The universe had been watching Earth for a long time. Not with kindness. Not with curiosity. With the cold, calculating patience of a predator that has already decided the outcome of the hunt, and is simply waiting for the right moment to close its jaws. The Galactic Interstellar Council, a body of 47 alien civilizations spread across 6 star systems, had always viewed humanity the way a farmer views a weed growing between the cracks of a perfectly laid stone path. Interesting, perhaps. Stubborn, certainly. But ultimately something to be managed. Something to be contained. Something that, if left unchecked, would eventually split the stone entirely. For 300 years, humanity had been clawing its way into the stars. It had not been a graceful climb. It never was with humans. They had arrived at the galactic stage not with polished diplomacy and rehearsed speeches, but with grease on their hands, fire in their eyes, and the kind of fearless ignorance that comes from a species that had survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and the slow suffocation of their own atmosphere, and had somehow, impossibly, come out the other side still breathing, still building, still dreaming. The Velthari had been the first to make contact. They were tall, blue-skinned beings with elongated skulls and 4 sets of eyes, each pair capable of seeing in a different spectrum of light. They had arrived in Earth's orbit in the year 2187, hovering above the Atlantic Ocean in a ship so vast it cast a shadow across 3 countries. Their message had been simple, transmitted in every human language simultaneously through a technology that even now, 3 centuries later, no human engineer fully understood. You are not alone. Join the Council. Obey its laws. Prosper. Humanity's response had been characteristically complicated. There had been panic, of course. Cities had emptied. Governments had scrambled. Religious institutions had split down the middle, some proclaiming it the end of days, others proclaiming it the beginning of a new gospel. Militaries had gone to the highest alert levels. Stock markets had collapsed overnight. But humanity had also done something else. Something the Velthari had not expected, because no species they had ever contacted had done it before. They had argued about it. Not quietly behind closed doors in hushed councils of elders. Loudly. Publicly. On every broadcast platform available in every language on every continent. Scientists argued with politicians. Philosophers argued with generals. Children argued with their parents. Strangers argued with strangers in coffee shops and on street corners and in online comment sections that stretched for thousands of posts. And out of that argument, messy, raw, beautiful, uniquely human, had come a decision. We will join. But on our terms. The Velthari had found this amusing. The Council had found it irritating. But humanity had held its position with the stubborn, quiet confidence of a species that had learned, the hard way, that no one in the universe was going to fight for them if they wouldn't fight for themselves. And so humanity had joined the Galactic Interstellar Council. On modified terms. With protected sovereignty clauses and economic negotiation rights and a seat at the table. A small seat in the back near the door, but a seat nonetheless. That had been 300 years ago. Now, in the year 2497, humanity was no longer sitting in the back near the door. Humanity had built, expanded, explored, colonized 17 planets across 4 star systems. Developed weapons technology that made the Council's oldest members nervous. Forged trade relationships, political alliances, cultural exchanges. Sent their music and their literature and their food and their laughter out across the stars until there were alien children on worlds 100 light-years away who fell asleep to human lullabies. And at the center of all of it, the living, breathing symbol of everything humanity had become in 3 centuries of galactic citizenship, was one woman, Director General Elara Voss. She was 61 years old, with silver hair she kept cut short and practical, and eyes the color of deep ocean water, that particular shade of blue-gray that changes depending on the light, that never quite settles into one fixed thing. She was not tall. She was not physically imposing. She did not have the booming voice of the old-fashioned leaders from history books. What she had was something rarer and harder to define, a quality that made every person in a room feel when she looked at them that she was truly seeing them. Not their title. Not their species. Not their political value. She had been Director General of the United Earth Interstellar Authority for 11 years. In those 11 years, she had negotiated the Syrian trade expansion, ended the Proxima border conflict without firing a single weapon, and, most significantly, drafted the Voss Accords, a landmark agreement that extended full galactic citizenship rights to 6 previously unrecognized species who had been living under exploitative labor contracts with Council members for decades. The Voss Accords had made her beloved by many. They had also made her enemies. Powerful enemies. Patient enemies. The kind of enemies that do not raise their voices or their weapons immediately, but who sit in their expensive chairs in their expensive chambers and calculate, with slow precision, exactly when and how to remove the obstacle in their path. Elara Voss did not know, could not have known, that on the morning of March 14, 2497, those enemies had finished their calculations. She was in her office on Meridian Station, a human-built space installation orbiting the neutral zone planet of Caspara 4, when her assistant, a young man named Daniel Cho, knocked on her open door and said, "Director General, the Velthari ambassador is here for the 9 o'clock." Elara looked up from the trade report she had been reading and smiled. "Send him in, Daniel." "Yes, ma'am." He paused. "Also, your coffee's getting cold." She glanced at the mug on her desk, steam no longer rising from it. "Thank you, Daniel." He nodded and disappeared. She took one sip of the cold coffee, made a face and set it back down. Then she straightened her jacket, folded her hands on the desk, and waited for the Velthari ambassador to enter. Ambassador Kael'vor was not the Velthari ambassador she was used to. The previous ambassador, a thoughtful elder named Soral, had retired 8 months ago. Kael'vor was younger, by Velthari standards practically juvenile, with sharper features and an unsettling stillness about him that Elara had never quite gotten comfortable with. He moved into the room like water finding its level, smooth and silent, and settled into the chair across from her desk with the kind of deliberate care that always made her feel like she was being assessed. "Ambassador," she said warmly. "Thank you for coming." "Director General," he replied. His voice was low, layered in the way of Velthari speech, as though two sounds were happening simultaneously, one just slightly out of phase with the other. "I trust you are well." "Very well, thank you. I've been reading the preliminary numbers from the Syrian sector. I think we're going to see a 30% increase in lithium exports by end of quarter, which should ease some of the pressure on the outer colony supply chains." Kael'vor inclined his head. "Yes, the numbers are promising." He paused. "There is, however, another matter I wish to discuss with you today. Off the record." Elara's eyes narrowed fractionally. Not with alarm, not yet, but with the practiced attention of a woman who had spent decades learning to read the spaces between words. "Of course," she said. "What's on your mind, Ambassador?" He reached into the fold of his formal robe and produced a small data tablet, which he placed on the desk between them and slid toward her with one long finger. "There is a proposal being circulated among certain council members," he said. "A restructuring of the citizenship rights framework established under your accords." Elara picked up the tablet and began to read. Her expression remained neutral, but internally, something cold moved through her. The proposal was not just a restructuring. It was a dismantling. It would effectively return the 6 newly recognized species to their previous unprotected status, strip the economic provisions, and, buried in subsection 12, written in the dense legal language she had learned to read like a second native tongue, transfer oversight of outer colony labor contracts back to the original council members who had held them before the accords. She set the tablet down. "Who is behind this?" she asked. "The Velthari Council Bloc," Kael'vor said. "The Dravath Syndicate. The Horn Collective." He paused. "They have enough votes, Director General. The measure will pass at the next full council session in 6 days." Elara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "And you're bringing this to me because?" "Because I believe it is wrong," Kael'vor said simply. "And because I believe you are the only person in this galaxy with the political standing to stop it." She looked at him for a long moment. There was something in his four-eyed gaze that she still could not fully read. That slight, persistent strangeness of looking into eyes that were not human and searching for the familiar language of expression that was not quite there. But there was something, she thought. Something that looked, if not like the human version of honesty, then like its equivalent. "I'll need to see the full vote projection," she said. "And I'll need 48 hours. You have 6 days." "I only need 48 hours," she repeated. For the first time since he had entered the room, Ambassador Kael'vor did something that surprised her. He smiled. It was not a human smile. The Velthari face was not built for it in quite the same way, but it was unmistakably warm. "Then I will leave you to your work, Director General." He stood, smoothed his robe and moved toward the door. Then he stopped. Without turning around he said quietly, "Be careful, Elara Voss. There are those for whom the defeat of this proposal would be intolerable." He left. Elara sat alone in her office for a moment, the cold coffee at her elbow, the data tablet on her desk, and the particular silence of deep space pressing gently against the station's outer hull. Then she picked up her communicator and called Daniel. Clear my schedule for the next 2 days, she said. And get me a secure line to the Proxima delegation. Yes, ma'am. Everything? Everything. A beat. And Daniel, bring me a fresh coffee. Already on my way, he said. She almost smiled. 3 days later, Elara Voss was dead. It happened during the preliminary council session on Kaspara 4. A working dinner, technically a social event, designed to establish the informal groundwork for the formal vote in 3 days. The kind of gathering that looks, from the outside, like diplomacy, and is, from the inside, a battlefield with better food. She had been making progress. In 48 hours of communications she had shifted 4 votes, not enough to defeat the proposal outright, but enough to force amendments to buy time to find a path. She had gone to the dinner knowing it wasn't over, knowing there was still a fight ahead. She never came home from that dinner. The official report, released 6 hours after her body was found in a private corridor of the Kasparan diplomatic complex, said cardiac arrest. Sudden, unexpected, no signs of trauma. Daniel Cho read the report sitting in Elara's empty office, with her cold, untouched coffee still on her desk. He did not believe a single word of it. And in 47 human colonies across 4 star systems, in the homes and schools and workplaces and streets of 34 billion human beings, the news arrived like a stone dropped into still water. Director General Elara Voss was dead. The ripples began immediately. But no one, not the council, not the Velthari bloc, not the Dravath syndicate, not the patient, calculating enemies who had finally, they believed, removed their obstacle, understood yet what kind of wave those ripples would become. No one had ever seen humanity truly angry before. They were about to. The grief came first. It always does with humans. That is something the alien civilizations of the Galactic Interstellar Council had never fully understood. The way human emotion moves in sequence, like a carefully arranged series of dominoes, each one knocking the next, in an order that seems chaotic from the outside but carries its own terrible internal logic. First the grief, then the disbelief, then the questions, then the anger. And the anger, that was where it became dangerous. On Earth, in the great open plaza outside the United Earth Interstellar Authority headquarters in Geneva, people had been gathering since the announcement. Silently at first. The way people gather at the scene of an accident, drawn by the gravity of loss, standing close together without speaking because there are no words yet for what they feel. Candles appeared. Flowers. Photographs of Elara Voss printed on paper and held up in the October wind. By the second night, the plaza held 40,000 people. By the third night, it held 400,000. And the silence had begun to crack. It started as whispers. The way whispers always start, careful, half-formed, passed from mouth to ear in the way of things people aren't sure they're allowed to say out loud yet. They killed her. It wasn't cardiac arrest. She was 61 and she ran marathons. The Velthari bloc. The Dravath syndicate. They had everything to gain. Someone ordered this. Daniel Cho was not in the plaza. He was in a secure briefing room 3 floors below the surface of the Geneva headquarters, sitting across a table from 5 people he trusted absolutely, which in his experience was about 4 more than most people in his line of work could claim. To his left was Admiral Yara Singh, commander of the Earth Defense Fleet, a compact, precise woman in her mid-50s with close-cropped black hair and the kind of face that gives nothing away by accident. Every expression she wore was a choice. To his right was Dr. Marcus Webb, chief forensic analyst for the Earth Interstellar Intelligence Division, a tall, angular man who wore rumpled clothes and carried himself with the slight distraction of someone whose mind is always working 3 steps ahead of his body. He had personally reviewed the medical examiner's report from Kaspara 4. Across the table was Councilwoman Petra Ramirez, one of the 6 human representatives on the Galactic Interstellar Council, the one who had been closest to Elara politically and personally, who had sat next to her at that dinner and had been the last human to see her alive. Next to Petra was Commander Zane Torres, head of the Director General's personal security detail. He was 38, built like someone who had been assembled from spare military parts, and he had the look of a man who had not slept in 72 hours and was operating entirely on discipline and the cold fuel of a guilt he was not yet allowing himself to feel. At the far end of the table sat Dr. Amara Okafor, the youngest person in the room by a decade, a xenobiologist and chemical analyst who had been quietly studying Velthari biochemistry for the past 4 years, on a research grant most people at the council level had never heard of, which was exactly how Elara Voss had arranged it. Daniel looked around the table. "Marcus," he said. "Start." Marcus Webb opened his tablet and turned it so the others could see. The official cause of death is listed as hypertensive cardiac event, essentially, a massive, sudden heart attack. No marks on the body. No toxins detected in the standard postmortem screening. He paused. The key word there is standard. Meaning? Admiral Singh said. Meaning the Caspian medical team ran a standard 47-compound toxicology panel, which is thorough by any normal measure. He tapped the screen. But Dr. Okafor has been tracking a specific class of biochemical compounds that the Velthari have been researching for the past 6 years, compounds that metabolize completely within 4 hours of administration and are not included in any standard toxicology panel because until 3 months ago, they were theoretical. Everyone turned to Elara Okafor. She was young, with deep brown skin and very still, very serious eyes that somehow managed to look both gentle and razor-sharp at the same time. She set her own tablet on the table. The compound is called Vel-9 internally, we don't have a common name for it yet. It's derived from a protein structure unique to Velthari biochemistry, which is why it was never considered as a potential weapon against humans. The assumption was that it wouldn't interact with human cardiovascular systems. She paused. That assumption was wrong. The room was very quiet. Vel-9 causes a rapid, massive constriction of the cardiac muscle. It mimics the physical presentation of a natural heart attack perfectly, the same enzyme markers, the same tissue damage pattern, the same electrocardiographic signature. There are no injection marks because it doesn't require injection. It's aerosolized. Inhaled. She looked around the table. It dissipates completely within 2 hours. If the postmortem is conducted after that window, as it was in Director General Voss's case, there is nothing to find. Commander Torres made a sound that was not quite a word. How certain are you? Admiral Singh asked. I can't prove it happened without a tissue sample taken within the window, Elara said. But the compound exists, I can confirm that. Its effects match exactly what is described in the autopsy report. And, she hesitated. 3 weeks ago, I found evidence in the research database that a Velthari biochemistry lab on their home world conducted a series of tests on human cardiovascular tissue samples. She set her jaw. They were testing for exactly this interaction. Silence. Then Petra Ramirez said, in a voice so quiet and controlled it was more frightening than if she had shouted, they tested it first. They made sure it would work. That's what the data suggests, Elara said. Daniel had been listening without moving, his hands flat on the table, his face expressionless. Now he looked at Admiral Singh. Yara, he said. What is the current readiness level of the fleet? Singh held his gaze. We're at standard peacetime posture. Which means? How long to war footing? The word sat in the room like a stone dropped in still water. Singh did not flinch. 72 hours for full active mobilization. 24 for forward defense posture. Put us at forward defense posture, Daniel said. Quietly. Daniel, Petra began. I'm not starting a war, Petra, he said. His voice was calm. Entirely, unnervingly calm. I'm making sure we're ready for one if someone else already has. He looked at her steadily. Because whoever did this, if Elara is right, they did not do it impulsively. They planned this. They tested it. They chose the timing carefully. That means they have a next step. The vote, Torres said suddenly. Everyone looked at him. The council vote on the Accord's restructuring. It's in 3 days. With Elara gone. With Elara gone, there's no one to stop it, Petra finished, her voice hollow. That's the next step, Daniel said. That's why the timing. They removed the obstacle. And now they expect to walk through the door she was standing in front of. He stood up. We are not going to let that happen. You're not the Director General, Daniel, Petra said, not unkindly. You were her Chief of Staff. Legally, the interim leadership passes to Deputy Director Holt. Deputy Director Holt is on medical leave, Daniel said. I checked. That leaves Acting Director Chin. Pause. Who is currently on Kaspara 4? Something shifted in the room. Who put Chin on Kaspara 4? Singh said slowly. He was assigned there 2 weeks ago, Daniel said. By an administrative order that came through normal channels. I've been going back through the paperwork. He looked around the table. Someone has been setting this up for a long time. Removing the people who would respond. Creating a leadership vacuum. His jaw tightened. They didn't just kill Elara Voss. They tried to cut the head off the entire command structure. Zane Torres stood up. For a man built the way he was built, there was something very controlled and very frightening about the way he did it. What do you need from me? He said. Daniel looked at him. I need you to go to Kaspara 4 and get Chin out of there. Torres nodded once, already moving toward the door. And Torres? Daniel said. The big man paused. Don't trust anyone on that station who you haven't personally verified in the last 72 hours. Torres gave him a look that said I was already planning that and left. Daniel looked at the remaining 4 people. Marcus, I need everything you can get on the VEL 9 research program. Names, dates, funding sources, chain of authorization. Everything. Marcus nodded and was already typing. Amara, can you write up the technical analysis in a form that can be presented to the council? Something clear enough that non-scientists can understand it? Yes, she said. Give me 6 hours. You have 4. He turned to Singh. Yara, forward defense posture, quietly, and get me a secure communication channel to every human colony governor. I want them briefed within 12 hours. Understood. Singh was already on her earpiece. He turned last to Petra Ramirez. She was watching him with an expression that was half grief and half something else. A kind of measuring, careful assessment, like someone watching a structure bear weight and wondering if it will hold. What about me? She said. You, Daniel said, are going back to Kaspara 4. You're going to walk into that council session and you're going to sit in Elara's seat and you're going to make very sure that none of them mistake our silence for submission. Petra was still for a moment. Then she stood up, straightened her jacket with the same small, precise gesture he had seen Elara Voss make 1,000 times. Understood, she said quietly. She walked out. Daniel stood alone in the briefing room. He looked at the empty chair where Elara Voss used to sit, not physically present in this room, but present the way leaders always are in the spaces they shaped, in the decisions they influenced, in the direction they pointed things before they were gone. He thought about the last time he had spoken to her. The morning she died. He had brought her the fresh coffee. She had taken it with both hands, the way she always did, and said, Daniel, do you know what the best thing about this job is? He had expected something profound. Something diplomatic. Something that would feel, in retrospect, like wisdom. She had said, the coffee. When it's actually hot. He had laughed. Now he stood alone in a briefing room 3 floors below the ground and allowed himself, for exactly 30 seconds, to feel the full weight of what had been taken. Not the political loss, not the strategic vacuum, not the galactic implications, but the human thing. The simple, irreplaceable loss of a person who had been extraordinary and also, in small daily moments, genuinely funny. 30 seconds. Then he picked up his communicator and got back to work. Above him, in the plaza, 400,000 people stood in the October wind with candles and photographs. The whispers were becoming words. The words were becoming voices. The voices were becoming something that the alien members of the Galactic Interstellar Council, listening from a safe distance, had no framework to understand. Because they had never seen what happens when you take something from humanity that humanity loves. They had always assumed, in their careful calculations, that humans were manageable, containable. That beneath the noise and the passion and the stubbornness there was ultimately a rational core that could be reasoned with, bargained with, brought to heel. They had never understood the thing that lives beneath the reason. They were about to. The colony ship Relentless was 3 weeks out from the Proxima system when Captain Sarah Okafor received the news. She was in the engine room when her comms officer, a young woman named Lena Park, patched through the emergency broadcast from Earth. Sarah had been helping one of the junior engineers troubleshoot a coolant coupling that had been giving them intermittent readings. She was that kind of captain, the kind who knew her ship from the inside out and believed that leadership happened in every compartment, not just the bridge. She heard Lena's voice through the internal comm. Captain. Priority 1 broadcast. Earth channels, all frequencies. Sarah straightened up, handed the calibration tool back to the engineer, and walked to the nearest wall panel. She pressed the receive button. The voice of the Earth Interstellar Authority Emergency Broadcast System said, in the flat, measured tones of an automated system delivering something a human being had recorded and authorized. This is a Class 1 priority notification from the United Earth Interstellar Authority. Director General Elara Voss has died. All Earth vessels and colonial installations are requested to observe a period of formal mourning. Further details will follow. This message will repeat. Sarah stood with her hands still on the panel long after the message ended. Behind her, she heard the engineer, a 22-year-old kid from Adelaide named Theo, make a small sound. Like the sound of something small breaking. Captain, he said. She turned around. Theo had gone pale. He was looking at her with the particular expression of someone waiting to be told it isn't real, that there's been a mistake, that the words don't mean what they sound like they mean. Sarah had been in the Earth Defense Fleet for 15 years before moving to civilian deep space transport. She had seen people receive bad news before. She had given bad news before. She knew there was no version of this moment that didn't hurt, and no way to make it hurt less except to be honest. "It's real," she said quietly. "I'm sorry, Theo." He nodded, looked at the floor, swallowed. She gave him a moment. Then she touched his shoulder briefly, a quick, firm touch, the kind that says, "I see you, you're not alone, but we keep going," and went to the bridge. The bridge crew was already assembled. 6 people, various ages, various backgrounds, all colonists in transit heading to Proxima B for new lives, or returning there after shore leave, or heading to the research stations in the outer ring. All of them had heard the broadcast. All of them had the same look on their faces, that mixture of grief and disbelief and something starting to harden underneath it. Sarah stood at the front of the bridge and looked at them. "You've all heard," she said. They had. "We're going to keep flying," she said. "Because that's what we do and because that's what she would have wanted. But I want each of you to take a minute. Right now. For yourselves." She paused. "Then we get back to work. Because humanity doesn't stop. It never has. And it's not going to start now." It was not a speech designed to inspire. She wasn't trying to inspire. She was trying to hold a room together with the simplest possible truth, the way you hold a fractured thing, carefully, with both hands, applying just enough pressure. It worked. Mostly. People wiped their eyes and went back to their stations. But Sarah noticed, she always noticed, that the hardening under the grief was not going away. It was settling in. Getting heavier. Getting colder. She went to her command chair and pulled up the secure channel. She sent a burst transmission to the Proxima colony governor, flagged for encryption, received notification. ETA Proxima be unchanged. Request full briefing on arrival. What do we know? The response came 4 hours later when the light delay allowed it. Governor Talisha Monroe of Proxima B, a woman Sarah had known for a decade and trusted implicitly. "We know enough. Briefing on arrival. Bring your officers. This is not over." Sarah read the message twice. Then she folded it into her secure log and went back to flying her ship. But she stayed awake that night. Sitting in the captain's chair in the quiet of the late shift, the stars outside the viewport doing what they always did, burning steadily, indifferently, across distances that made every human grief feel small and every human anger feel smaller. She thought about Elara Voss. She had met her once at a colonial affairs summit on Mars years ago. Elara had been surrounded by people, she always was, but she had found Sarah in the crowd and said without preamble, "You're the captain of the Relentless, aren't you? I read your testimony about the Proxima supply chain delays. You were right and I'm sorry it took us so long to act on it." Sarah had been surprised into honesty. "I didn't think anyone at your level actually read those testimonies." And Elara had said with genuine warmth, "I read everything. That's the job." Sarah looked at the stars and felt the particular grief of losing someone you only met once but knew from that meeting alone was irreplaceable. And under the grief something harder. This is not over. 3 days after Elara Voss's death, Councilwoman Petra Ramirez walked into the full session chamber of the Galactic Interstellar Council on Caspara 4. She was alone. This was unusual. Council representatives typically entered with delegations, advisors, assistants, protocol officers. The show of numbers was part of the diplomacy, a way of demonstrating the weight of institutional support behind each representative. Petra walked in alone because she had chosen to walk in alone. She wanted them to see what a single human being looked like when they decided to walk into a room. The chamber was enormous, designed to accommodate 47 species, which meant it had to account for an extraordinary range of sizes, atmospheres, sensory capabilities and cultural norms around space and proximity. The result was a vast, tiered space with individual environmental pods for species with specific atmospheric needs, translation matrices built into every surface, and a floor-level speaking area at the center where representatives addressed the full council. Petra descended to the speaking area and stood in the center of the floor. She was 53 years old, with dark hair going gray at the temples and the kind of posture that comes from spending a lifetime refusing to make herself smaller to fit other people's expectations. She wore a simple dark suit, human formal wear, no ceremonial additions, no concessions to galactic fashion norms. She had dressed the way Elara always dressed, practically, precisely as if to say, "I am here to work, not to perform." The chamber was full. Every member civilization had sent representation. There was a quality to the silence as she stood there that she recognized, the silence of a room that is waiting to see what you do next. She let them wait, just for a moment, long enough to make clear that the waiting was her choice. Then she spoke. 3 days ago, she said, Director General Elara Voss died on this station. Her voice carried clearly, The translation matrix handled it, pushing her words into 47 different languages simultaneously, a technology so advanced it even captured tone and emphasis. She made sure her tone gave them everything. The grief, yes, but underneath it, solid as bedrock, the thing that was not grief at all. The official report says cardiac arrest. I am here, as the senior human representative to this council, to tell you that humanity does not accept that report. We are conducting our own investigation. And we are requesting that this council open a formal inquiry, with full access to all security records, environmental logs and personnel records from this station for the 48 hours preceding the Director General's death. A ripple moved through the chamber. She watched it, the way information travels differently through different species, the microreactions, the shifts in posture and coloration and the subtle atmospheric adjustments that served as emotional signals for species that didn't use facial expressions. The Velthary block, she noticed, was very still. In the meantime, she continued, humanity formally requests that all votes on the Accord's restructuring proposal be suspended pending the outcome of this inquiry. She paused. This is not a demand. It is a request. We are still members of this council, and we still believe in this council's capacity to act with justice. Another pause. But I want to be very clear about something. She looked at the Velthary block. Directly. Without diplomatic softening. 34 billion human beings are watching what happens in this chamber right now. They have lost someone they loved. They are asking questions. And how this council responds to those questions, with transparency and integrity, or with delay and procedural obstruction, will determine not just the future of the Accords, but the future of humanity's relationship with every civilization in this room. She let that sit. We do not make threats, she said. That is not what this is. This is a statement of reality. Humanity is grieving. Humanity is asking questions. And humanity needs to know that the institutions it has trusted for 3 centuries are worthy of that trust. She turned and walked back to the human delegation section without waiting for a response. Behind her, the chamber erupted in the multilingual, multitonal chaos of 47 civilizations all trying to talk at once. In the Velthary section, Ambassador Kaelvor sat very still and thought about the fact that he had warned them. He had told them, in the private communications they had so carefully encrypted, in the meetings they had held in rooms they believed were secure, that humans were not manageable in the way they assumed. That Elara Voss was not the only obstacle. That removing her would not drain the lake, it would simply tip it over. He had told them and they had not listened. He sat in his pod and watched the chaos in the chamber and thought, with the cold precision of a man who has made a catastrophic mistake and knows it, what have we done? Back on Earth, Daniel Cho was in the middle of his 4th consecutive 18-hour day when Amara Okafor walked into his temporary command center. He had moved from the secure briefing room to a larger facility that could handle the communications volume, and put a data chip on his desk. The technical analysis, she said. Complete. Cross-referenced with 6 independent biochemical databases and peer-reviewed by 3 xenobiologists I trust. Daniel picked up the chip. And? The evidence isn't circumstantial anymore, she said. The Velthary research database records were encrypted but not encrypted enough. We have internal research logs showing the development of Vel-9 specifically for use against human subjects. We have test results. We have dosage calculations. She held his gaze. We have authorization codes on the research files. The authorization traces back to the Velthary Science Ministry. The room was very quiet. Which means, Daniel said carefully, that this was not a rogue action. This was state-authorized. Yes, Amara said. He sat back. Looked at the ceiling for a moment, just long enough to do the full calculation of what this meant, what it changed, what it required. Then he looked at Admiral Singh, who was standing at the communications board across the room. Yara, he said. I need the fleet. Singh turned around. Her face was still, controlled. But there was something in her eyes that had shifted, a kind of cold illumination like a light coming on in a dark room. All of it, she said. All of it, Daniel said. Forward defense posture is over. I need full active mobilization. Singh held his gaze for 3 seconds. Long enough for him to see her weighing it, understanding the full weight of what he was asking, the threshold he was asking her to cross. Then she turned back to the communications board and began making calls. Daniel looked at the data chip in his hand. He thought about 34 billion people. He thought about a woman who had spent her life fighting for the rights of species that nobody else was willing to fight for. He thought about a cold cup of coffee and a small joke about the best thing about the job. He thought about the word authorized. They had made a decision, somewhere in the upper levels of Velthary power, in a room he would never see, around a table he would never sit at. They had looked at a woman who was inconvenient to their plans and they had authorized her removal. Clinical. Untraceable, they had believed. They had not understood what they were authorizing. Not the death of one woman. The awakening of 34 billion. He set the chip down on his desk and picked up his communicator. He had 12 calls to make, and they all needed to happen in the next 2 hours. The Tempest was no longer just forming. It was beginning to move. The news broke publicly on a Tuesday. Not through the official Earth Interstellar Authority channels. Those were still carefully managed, still operating within the formal diplomatic framework that Daniel Cho was trying to maintain for as long as he possibly could. The news broke the way news always breaks in the 25th century, the way it had always broken even in the 21st. Through a person who knew something and could not, in good conscience, stay silent. The person was Dr. Marcus Webb. He had not intended to leak it. Or rather, he had not decided to leak it. There is a difference and it matters. He had spent 4 days buried in the data, building the case, cross-referencing every piece of evidence with the methodical precision that had made him one of the best forensic analysts in the interstellar intelligence community. He had barely slept. He had barely eaten. He had existed in that compressed, airless state of pure focus that investigators sometimes fall into when they are building something that they know matters enormously. And then, at 3:17 in the morning on a Tuesday, sitting alone in the analysis lab with the data laid out before him in undeniable sequence, he had looked at the full picture of what had been done to Elara Voss. The research, the testing, the authorization, the timing, the clinical execution, and something had broken loose inside him. He was 53 years old. He had worked in intelligence for 26 years. He had seen terrible things. He had built cases around terrible things and handed them to the people authorized to act on them and trusted that the process would work. But the people authorized to act on this were still maneuvering through diplomatic channels and political calculations and the measured, incremental steps of institutional response. And Elara Voss was still dead. He sent the full technical analysis, Amara's report, his own forensic work, the authorization trace, all of it, to 3 separate journalists. Not Earth-only journalists. Interstellar Press Corps. The kind of people whose work reached every human colony and a significant portion of non-human civilization. Then he sent a message to Daniel Cho. "I'm sorry. I couldn't hold it." Daniel read the message at 6 in the morning, got very still for approximately 5 seconds and then exhaled. "Okay," he said to no one in particular. "Okay." He picked up his communicator and called Admiral Singh. "Yara. It's breaking." "I know," she said. She had clearly already been briefed. "The colony networks are already picking it up. Proxima B is, Daniel, Proxima B's governor has been on the line for the last 20 minutes. What does Monroe want? She wants to know if the fleet is moving. Tell her yes." Pause. "She's also asking about civilian volunteer forces." Daniel was very still for a moment. "Tell her to stand by on that. Tell her," he stopped. "Made a decision. Tell her I'll call her directly within the hour." He ended the call and stood up from his desk. His chief of staff, a competent young woman named Dr. Keene who had been with him through the last 4 days of crisis management and had not once asked for anything she didn't absolutely need, appeared in the doorway. "The press corps is gathering outside," she said. "They want a statement." "I know," he said. "What do you want to tell them?" He thought about it. About the 47 civilizations watching. About the 34 billion humans who had been asking questions for 4 days and were now getting answers that were worse than anything they had imagined. About the Velthary Science Ministry authorization codes. About a woman who read everything because that was the job. "The truth," he said. "We're going to tell them the exact truth." He straightened his jacket, the same small, precise gesture he had seen 1,000 times, that now felt like the most important thing he had ever done, and walked toward the door. The press briefing was carried live on every human broadcast network across 4 star systems. Daniel stood at the podium in the main communication hall of the UEIA headquarters and looked out at the assembled press, human journalists, several alien correspondents from non-council species, and the recording systems of 3 council member states who had embedded observers in the Geneva facility. He was not a natural public speaker. He had always been a background person, the one who made things work, who built the structures that allowed other people to lead. He had spent 11 years making Elara Voss's work possible, and he had done it from behind the scenes because he believed, genuinely, that good support was its own form of leadership. But Elara was gone. And the people who had taken her were counting on the vacuum she had left to swallow everything, the accords, the protections, the progress. They were counting on grief and chaos and the absence of a strong voice. He would not let them have it. 4 days ago, he said, his voice steady, Director General Elara Voss died on Kaspara 4. The official report listed cardiac arrest as the cause of death. That report is false. The room exploded immediately. He waited. Our investigation has established that Director General Voss was killed by a targeted biochemical compound designated VEL-9, developed in a Velthari Science Ministry research facility over a period of 6 years. The compound was specifically designed to be undetectable in standard postmortem screening and to mimic the presentation of natural cardiac failure. Its development was authorized at the level of the Velthari Science Ministry, which means this was not a rogue action. This was a state-sanctioned assassination. The word landed in the room like a stone dropped from a great height. Assassination. He continued. We have technical documentation, research logs, authorization codes, and a full chain of evidence that we are submitting to the Galactic Interstellar Council as the basis for a formal inquiry. We are also sharing this evidence publicly, in full, because the people of Earth and every human colony in this galaxy deserve to know what happened to their leader. He looked directly at the camera, not the press corps, not the room, but the camera, and through it, the 34 billion people who would watch this. Humanity is not going to be silent, he said. We are not going to accept this, process it quietly, and move on. We are going to pursue justice through every legal, diplomatic, and if necessary, military channel available to us. We are going to do this not out of vengeance, but out of the simple, non-negotiable truth that what was done to Elara Voss cannot be allowed to stand. He paused. To the Galactic Interstellar Council, we are requesting an emergency full session within 48 hours. To the Velthari government, we are requesting an immediate, full accounting. To every human colony across every star system we have reached, you are not alone. Your government sees you. Your government is acting. And your government is not going to let the people who did this believe for one more minute that they have won. He stepped back from the podium. The room was in chaos, but it was a different kind of chaos now. Not the chaos of shock and grief that had already happened. This was the chaos of something shifting, something massive and slow beginning to move. Dr. Keene appeared at his elbow. Message from Governor Monroe on Proxima B, she said quietly. What does it say? She handed him the tablet. He read it. 5 words. We are ready. Say when. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he wrote back, stand by. Not yet. But soon. On Proxima B in the colony city of New Wellington, a man named Corporal James Okafor, Amara's older brother, a retired Earth Defense Fleet Marine who had spent 3 years on the Proxima frontier before taking a civilian engineering job, was watching the press briefing on a public screen in a market square when Daniel Cho said the word assassination. The square was full of people. Settlers, farmers, engineers, teachers, children home from school because the colony's school board had suspended classes for the morning in observance of the official mourning period. People of every background, every age, every shade of humanity spread across 4 star systems. When Cho said assassination, James heard the sound the crowd made. It was not a gasp. It was not a shout. It was something below both of those, a low, collective exhalation like the sound of a held breath finally released. The sound of confirmation meeting the anger that had been building for 4 days and finding, in one word, the shape it had been waiting for. He stood in the market square and felt the thing that was moving around him, through all of them, and thought about his sister who had been working quietly on the evidence that had just blown everything open, and about Elara Voss, who had never met James but had passed legislation that had made his job on the Proxima frontier safer and fairer, and about the particular feeling of being 34 billion people on the edge of something that had no name yet but that everyone could feel. He pulled out his communicator and called Amara. She picked up on the second ring. I saw it, he said. I know, she said. Her voice was very quiet. Are you okay? Pause. I don't know, she said honestly. I think so. I think, another pause. James, they used my research. The compound I was studying, they had been developing it as a weapon the whole time. And I didn't see it. I was right there in the data and I... Hey, he said firmly. Stop. You figured it out. You built the case. You did your job. She still died. Yes, he said. She did. He looked out at the square, at the people, at the shifting building thing in the air. But James, something's happening. Here on the colony. In the square right now. People are, it's different. It's changed. I know, Amara said. It's the same everywhere. I've been watching the feeds. Pause. Daniel's going to need people. He said he'd call Monroe about volunteers. I know, James said. You're going to volunteer. It wasn't a question. He looked at the square. At the people. At the screen still showing Daniel Cho's face, still carrying the weight of a word that had changed everything. "Yeah," he said. "I am." The emergency session of the Galactic Interstellar Council convened not in 48 hours, as Daniel Cho had requested. It convened in 36. This alone was significant. Emergency sessions of the full council were extraordinarily rare. In 300 years of human membership, there had been 4. The standard procedural timeline for convening one was 5 to 7 days. 36 hours was unprecedented. It told Daniel everything he needed to know about the level of alarm his press briefing had caused. He watched the session from Geneva via secure live feed, on a screen that filled one entire wall of his command center. Petra Ramirez was on the floor, backed now by the full human delegation, 12 representatives, support staff, legal advisors, and 3 xenobiological consultants including Amara Okafor, whose technical documentation was now in the hands of every council member. The session opened with procedural chaos. The Velthari delegation immediately objected to the framing of the agenda, filing 3 separate procedural challenges in the first 20 minutes. The chair of the session, a Dravith elder named Council Primus Uvula, whose species communicated through bioluminescent skin patterns as well as vocalizations, spent the better part of an hour simply managing the room. Daniel watched it all with the focused, patient attention of someone who has been through enough political battles to know that the noise at the surface is rarely the actual fight. The actual fight in this case was happening in the vote count. He had a direct line open to Petra, text only, running alongside the video feed. "What's the count?" he said. Her response came 90 seconds later, shifting. 3 council members I thought were with the Velthari bloc are making noises. Horn Collective Rep has been in private conversation with the Syrian delegation for the last 20 minutes. The Horn Collective, he thought. One of the 3 entities behind the Accord's restructuring proposal. One of the 3 that, the evidence suggested, had known about, if not actively participated in, the assassination plan. "What does Syria want?" he sent back. "Same thing everyone wants right now. Distance. They want to be very clearly, very publicly on the record as not having anything to do with this." He sat back. "Let them have it," he sent. "If they're willing to vote with us, accept it. We'll deal with the moral complexity later." Pause. Then understood. "You're starting to sound like her." He stared at that message for a moment. Then he set it aside and kept watching. The turning point in the session came from an unexpected direction. Ambassador Kaelvor, the same Velthari ambassador who had brought the restructuring proposal to Elara Voss's desk, who had warned her to be careful, who had sat very still in the Velthari block section during the chaos after Petra's opening statement, stood up and requested the floor. The room went quiet in a peculiar way. The Velthari block immediately entered what appeared, from the external behavioral signals, to be agitation, a rapid, subtle shifting of posture, a change in the quality of stillness that characterized Velthari emotional states. Kaelvor was given the floor. He stood at the center speaking area and looked at the chamber for a long moment before speaking. "I am not here," he said, "on behalf of the Velthari government. I am here on behalf of myself. I am aware that this distinction may have consequences for me personally that I am prepared to accept." The Velthari block's agitation increased visibly. "I brought the restructuring proposal to Director General Voss's attention 3 days before her death," he continued. "I did so because I believed she had the right to know what was being planned, and because I believed the proposal was wrong. I also warned her that those behind the proposal would find her opposition intolerable." He paused. "I was not specific enough in that warning. I did not know at that time how specifically they intended to make her opposition stop. I know now." The chamber had gone utterly silent. "The technical evidence presented by the human delegation is accurate," he said. "I have reviewed it independently. The Vel-9 compound is real. Its development was authorized within the Velthari Science Ministry. I was not part of that authorization, but I knew colleagues who were involved in the research program, and I did not ask the right questions." He looked directly at the human delegation. "For that failure I offer no excuse. Only the acknowledgement that it was a failure." He turned to face the full chamber. What the Velthari government did, or rather what certain members of that government did, was not a diplomatic act. It was not a political maneuver. It was murder. And this council must call it by that name. He sat down. The silence held for exactly 3 seconds. Then the chamber erupted again, but this time the quality was different. Less defensive chaos, more the urgent, purposeful noise of a body that has been given permission to say what it was already thinking. On the wall screen in Geneva, Daniel watched Kaelvor sit down and thought, "He's just handed us the vote." The council vote was not what Daniel had expected. He had expected a close margin, perhaps a slim majority for the inquiry motion, enough to move forward but not enough to feel definitive. He had expected the Velthari bloc to hold together and the Dravith syndicate representatives to play both sides and the whole thing to be a grinding, exhausting partial victory that would require months more of work to build on. What he got was 41-6. 41 council member civilizations voted in favor of the full formal inquiry, the suspension of the restructuring proposal, and the establishment of a special accountability tribunal. 6 voted against, the Velthari bloc minus Kael'vor who abstained. The 6 dissenting votes were noted for the record. They would matter later. But in that moment, Daniel looked at the vote count on his screen and felt something move through him that he did not immediately have a name for. It was not triumph. This was not over, not even close. It was not relief. The grief was still there, solid and unchanged. It was something more like the feeling of a structure holding weight the way it was designed to hold it. The feeling of a system working the way it was supposed to work, after days of fearing that it wouldn't. He sent Petra a message, "Well done." Her response, immediate, "Don't thank me. Thank Kael'vor." He thought about that. Then he sent another message, "Can you arrange a private meeting? Me you Kael'vor. After the session." Pause. He's already requested it. The meeting happened in a small conference room off the main session chamber. No staff, no advisors, no recording. All 3 of them had agreed to that before entering. Kael'vor sat across from Daniel and Petra, his 4 eyes settling on Daniel with a particular quality of Velthari direct attention, fully present, fully focused in a way that could feel unnerving if you weren't used to it. "You took a significant risk," Daniel said. "Yes," Kael'vor said. "Why?" Kael'vor was quiet for a moment. "Because she was right," he said simply. Elara Voss was right about the Accords. She was right about the species they protected. She was right about the direction this council needed to move. Pause. And because what was done to her was wrong in a way that transcends political calculation. I am not a young ambassador with idealistic notions. I have served in diplomatic roles for 40 years. I have seen compromises that were ugly and still necessary. I have seen situations where the right path was difficult to find. Another pause. This was not one of those situations. This was simple. What was done was wrong. Daniel looked at him. "What can you tell us about who specifically authorized it? Within the science ministry?" "I can give you names," Kael'vor said. 3 members of the ministry's senior council. And, he paused. 1 member of the Velthari High Command. Petra and Daniel exchanged a glance. "How high?" Petra said. "High enough that this will destabilize the current government," Kael'vor said. "Which is, I think, what needs to happen. What cannot happen is that those responsible face no consequences. If this council, if this galaxy, allows the assassination of a planetary leader to go unpunished because prosecuting it is politically inconvenient, then we have established a precedent that will define galactic civilization for the next 1,000 years." Daniel thought about Elara. "About I read everything, that's the job." "I agree," he said. "What do you need from us?" "Protection," Kael'vor said. "I have already been suspended from my ambassadorial role by the Velthari government. I expect further measures." Pause. "And I need to know that the names I provide will be used correctly. Through the tribunal. Through law. I need humanity's guarantee that this does not become something else." He looked at Daniel. "You have 34 billion very angry people," he said. "And you have a fleet that I know is on full mobilization. I'm not naive about what your press briefing meant, and I understand why it was necessary. I am asking you, Daniel Cho, to make sure that what comes next is justice and not a war." The room was very quiet. Daniel looked at him for a long time. "I can't promise you there won't be a war," he said. "I can promise you that humanity will not start one. But if the people who killed Elara Voss believe they can hide behind political process and wait this out," he paused, "they should understand that patience has limits." Kael'vor studied him. "That is an honest answer," he said. "I accept it." He placed a data chip on the table between them. "The names." The data chip contained 6 names. Daniel read them in the car on the way back to his secure comms facility, with Petra sitting next to him in silence and the Geneva night rolling past the windows. He read them twice. Then he handed the chip to Petra without speaking. She read it. Her face did not change. She had the particular stillness of someone who is feeling something too large to show on a face and has learned, through long practice, to hold it. "The 4th name," she said finally. "I know," Daniel said. "That's not a ministry official. That's... I know." The fourth name was Velthary High Chancellor Drexvorath. Not a senior bureaucrat. Not a ministry official acting outside sanctioned authority. The High Chancellor. The head of the Velthary government. This was no longer a case of institutional malfeasance. This was the head of state of one of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations ordering the murder of humanity's leader. The car drove through the Geneva night. Outside, the city was quiet in the way cities are quiet when something massive has happened and people have gone home to process it privately. The candles in the plaza were still burning. Someone had started a running tally on the main screen. The number of days since Elara Voss's death, the number of hours since Daniel's press briefing, the vote count from the council session. Numbers in the way that humans use numbers when they need to make grief concrete and countable. What are you going to do with this? Petra asked. Submit it to the tribunal, Daniel said. And if the tribunal moves too slowly? He looked out the window. Then we'll have to have a different conversation. She absorbed that. What does Admiral Singh say? Singh says the fleet is ready, he said. She says she can have a forward strike force at the Velthary border within 72 hours. He paused. She also says, and I want you to hear this exactly as she said it to me, she says that she will not fire the first shot. But she will not hesitate to fire back. Petra was quiet for a moment. Elara wouldn't have wanted a war. No, Daniel said. She would have wanted justice. Pause. But she also, he stopped. Started again. She also told me once, years ago, when I asked her why she fought so hard on the citizenship rights issue when the political cost was so high, she said, because the moment we let someone take something from us without consequences, the moment we teach them it's safe to take more. The car pulled up to the facility. They sat for a moment, neither of them moving. She was talking about trade policy, Petra said. She was talking about everything, Daniel said. He got out of the car. He spent the next 4 hours on calls. Governor Monroe of Proxima B. Ready, she said again. The colony's civilian volunteer militia, a designation that had not been formally used since the early frontier days but had never been officially dissolved, had 3,000 registered members and had been conducting informal readiness assessments for the past 2 days. I'm not asking for authorization to mobilize, Monroe said carefully. I'm asking for guidance. Stand by, Daniel said for the third time. But make sure they're ready. Colony Governor Chen of Kepler Station, the one who had been moved to Kaspara 4 in what was now clearly a deliberate act of interference with human command structure, had been safely retrieved by Commander Torres and was back at his post, furious and fully briefed. What do you need from me? Chen said. Secure your station, Daniel said. Double the security protocols on the communication arrays. I don't want any interference with the colony network over the next 72 hours. Done, Chen said immediately. And Daniel, whatever you need, however this goes, we're with you. Admiral Singh gave him a full status report. The fleet was in full mobilization. 6 heavy cruisers and 12 escort vessels were positioned at the edge of the Velthary border zone, technically within neutral space, technically not a provocation, technically within every treaty provision that governed fleet deployment. Technically. The Velthary are monitoring us, Singh said. They know we're there. Good, Daniel said. They've also repositioned their own vessels. 4 warships, moved from their home system to the outer edge of their territorial boundary. Pause. They're watching us watch them. Then everyone knows where everyone stands, Daniel said. Good. He ended the call with Singh and sat for a moment in the quiet of the facility, in the particular silence of someone who has moved all the pieces he can move and must now wait to see which way they fall. His communicator buzzed. An incoming message, flagged highest priority, from an address he did not recognize at first. Then he read the sender identification code and felt a particular cold clarity move through him. It was from the Velthary High Chancellor's personal communication office. He opened it. The message was brief, formal. In the high diplomatic register that Velthary used for official communications, which the translation matrix rendered in a slightly elevated English that felt like reading a letter from another century. Acting Director General Cho. The Velthary High Command has taken note of the Galactic Interstellar Council's emergency session vote and the formal inquiry motion. The Velthary government categorically denies all allegations of involvement in the death of Director General Voss and will not recognize the authority of the proposed accountability tribunal over Velthary internal affairs. We request a direct diplomatic channel to discuss the resolution of the current crisis. We urge restraint and the continuation of dialogue. He read it twice. Then he sent one response. Acknowledge the crimes. Surrender the individuals named in the inquiry. Accept the tribunal's authority. These are not negotiating positions. These are preconditions for dialogue. He sent it and set his communicator down. Dr. Keene appeared in the doorway. Marcus Webb is here, she said. He wants to see you. Marcus, who had leaked the report, who had sent "I'm sorry I couldn't hold it." Daniel had not spoken to him since. There had not been time. But the truth was that he had not been angry. He had understood immediately why Marcus had done what he did, had recognized the choice of a person who could not live with the alternative. He had simply filed it and moved on because moving on was what the moment required. "Send him in," Daniel said. Marcus came in looking like a man who had not slept properly in days, which was accurate, and carrying a tablet and the expression of someone prepared to receive whatever consequences are coming. "Sit down," Daniel said. Marcus sat. "You leaked the report," Daniel said. "Yes," Marcus said. "I know the protocols. I know the implications. I'm prepared to." "Marcus," Daniel said. "Stop." He looked at him. "You were right to do it." Marcus blinked. "The formal channels would have moved too slowly," Daniel said. "The public disclosure forced the council to act in 36 hours instead of 7 days. That matters. The momentum matters." Pause. "You broke protocol. You acted outside your authority. And it was the right call." He met Marcus's eyes. "We're going to have a conversation later about what the proper procedure should look like for situations like this because we need better protocols. But right now, we have other things to handle." Marcus let out a long breath. Then he straightened and held up his tablet. "I have more," he said. "Tell me." "The Vel-9 research wasn't just Vel-3," Marcus said. "It was a joint program. Very deeply buried. The Vel-3 side was the development arm, but the funding came through a shell organization connected to the Dravith Syndicate. And the authorization request," he turned the tablet toward Daniel. "There are communications. Between Drex Vorith and 3 senior Dravith executives. Dated 4 months ago. They're discussing the Voss problem in language that is," he paused, "diplomatic. But clear." Daniel looked at the communications. They were indeed diplomatic. And clear. "How many people know about this?" he said. "Right now? Just me, you, and Amara. I brought her into it an hour ago. Can you verify the authentication on these communications?" "Already done. They're real." Daniel sat back. He thought about Kael'vor saying it will destabilize the current government. He thought about seeing 6 heavy cruisers sitting in neutral space. He thought about 34 billion people watching. The Dravith Syndicate was not a government. It was a corporate body, technically, but with the economic and political power of a mid-tier civilization, spread across multiple star systems, embedded deeply in the Council's trade infrastructure. Taking on the Vel-3 government and the Dravith Syndicate simultaneously was exactly what Elara Voss would have done. He picked up the tablet. "Get me a secure line to the tribunal preparation team," he said. "We're adding to the evidence package." On Proxima B, James Okafor reported to the Colony Defense Office at 7 in the morning and filled out a volunteer registration form. He was not alone. The waiting room of the Colony Defense Office, a small, functional government building that normally processed maybe 2 or 3 visitors a day on routine administrative matters, had 40 people in it. By the time James had filled out his form and handed it to the clerk, 8 more had walked in. The clerk, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Ewan who had worked the desk for 9 years and had never seen anything like this, was handling it with admirable composure. She processed each form methodically, asked the standard questions, recorded the standard information, and did not allow her expression to show the fact that she was watching something she had no precedent for. James sat in a chair along the wall and waited. Around him, the room filled with people who had nothing obviously in common except that they lived on Proxima B and they had watched Daniel Cho's press briefing and they had felt the particular thing that happens when someone takes something you love and calls it nothing. There was a man in his 70s who introduced himself as Frank and said he was a retired systems engineer who knew nothing about fighting but could fix anything with a power source and 2 wires. There was a woman in her 30s named Yuki who said she was a trauma physician and had already contacted the medical corps. There was a teenage boy who had come alone and told Mrs. Ewan he was 18. He was visibly not 18, and Mrs. Ewan told him gently that the minimum age was 21, and he sat outside on the steps for a long time before eventually walking home. James watched it all and thought about what this was. It was not military recruitment in any formal sense. There had been no mobilization order, no official call to arms. It was something older than that. Something that predated military structures and government authorizations and the organized machinery of war. It was the thing that happens when people feel, in the deepest, most immediate part of themselves, that something has been taken from them and they are not willing to let it stay taken. He called Elara again from the waiting room. "How's it going?" she asked. "There are 50 people here trying to volunteer for a militia that hasn't officially been activated," he said. "And Mrs. Ewan is handling it like a champion." Elara almost laughed. It was the closest thing to a laugh either of them had managed in days. "It's the same on the other colonies," she said. "Daniel knows. He's been getting reports. What's he going to do about it?" "I don't know yet," she said. "But James, the fleet is at the border. And Drex Vorith sent Daniel a diplomatic message this morning." "What did it say?" She told him. He was quiet for a moment. "What did Daniel say back?" She told him that too. James sat in the waiting room on Proxima B, surrounded by 50 people who had come to volunteer their bodies and their skills for something they couldn't yet fully name, and he thought about Daniel Cho sending these are not negotiating positions to the head of the Velthari government. "She picked the right person," he said. "Who did?" "Elara. Whatever training she gave Daniel, whatever she built in him over those 11 years, she picked the right person to still be standing after she was gone." Elara was quiet for a moment. "He didn't pick himself, you know," she said. "He told me he's been trying to find who should be in charge, legally speaking, and it keeps coming back to him. Like the situation is choosing him rather than the other way around. That's how it always happens with the right people," James said. Mrs. Ewan called his name. He stood up. "I have to go," he said to Elara. "James?" Her voice was careful. "Be careful." "Always am," he said. "You're not," she said. "But be anyway." He ended the call and went to the desk. The Velthari government's response to Daniel's preconditions arrived 8 hours later. It was not a surrender. It was not even a softening. It was a denial, formal, comprehensive, and accompanied by the simultaneous announcement that the Velthari government was withdrawing its representative from the Galactic Interstellar Council, pending resolution of the politically motivated attacks on Velthari sovereignty. And then, 3 hours after that, the Velthari warships moved. Not toward human territory. Not yet. They repositioned to the edge of the Casper neutral zone, technically within legal parameters, technically not a crossing of any established line. But the direction was clear. The message was clear. "You do not get to dictate terms to us." Admiral Singh called Daniel at 11:17 at night. "They're signaling," she said. "Not a crossing. But a signal." "I see it," Daniel said. He had the tactical display running on his desk screen. 6 dots that were human ships, 4 dots that were Velthari. The neutral zone between them. Caspara 4 somewhere in the middle. "The Casparan government is asking us to withdraw from the neutral zone," Singh said. "They're worried about being in the middle of this. Tell Caspara that we will withdraw our ships to outside their planetary system as soon as the Velthari do the same," Daniel said. "We are not leaving unilaterally." "Understood." Pause. "Daniel, if they cross into neutral zone airspace." "Hold position," Daniel said immediately. "Do not fire unless fired upon. But do not move back." "Understood," Singh said again. He heard something in her voice, not hesitation but a kind of careful gravity, the quality of someone who knows they are standing at a threshold and is being very deliberate about every step. "Yara," he said. "How are the crews?" Pause. "Ready," she said. "That's not the concern. The concern is," she stopped. "Say it," he said. "The concern is that they're not just ready. They want this. They've been watching the feeds. They've heard everything you heard. And they are," a pause. "You know how a held breath feels? In a whole ship full of people?" He knew. "Keep them steady," he said. "Justice first. Always justice first." "Yes, sir," she said. He ended the call and sat in the night quiet of his facility, the tactical display glowing on his desk, the 6 blue dots and the 4 red ones holding their positions across the void. His communicator buzzed again. A message from an address he recognized this time. Ambassador Kaelvor's personal secure line. "Daniel, I need to tell you something. The warship repositioning, it is not a signal. It is a cover. I have received information from a source within the high command that I trust. The repositioning is intended to draw your fleet's attention to the Casparan zone while a separate action is prepared." Daniel read the message and felt something go cold and very focused in his chest. "What action?" He wrote back. The response came in 30 seconds. "Meridian Station. Your station, the one where Elara Voss worked. There is a plan to destroy it. To remove the site of the investigation. There are still records there that have not been transferred. The tribunal preparation team is still on board." Daniel was already calling Singh before he had finished reading the message. "Yara. Meridian Station. Now. What? Get a ship to Meridian Station. Now. We have intelligence of an incoming strike. Go. He heard her move immediately, the background sounds of a command bridge, voices, the crisp snap of orders being given. I'm sending the Defiant, she said. ETA 47 minutes. That might not be enough time, he said. Who do we have closer? Nothing in the direct vicinity. We pulled back from that area 3 days ago as part of the border repositioning. Pause. There's a civilian vessel. The Relentless. She's in the Meridian approach corridor about 11 minutes out. She's a transport, not a combat ship, but she has standard shield arrays. Get her on the line, Daniel said. Now. Captain Sarah Okafor was in the middle of a routine docking approach when her comms officer, Lena, said with controlled urgency, Captain, we have an emergency signal. Earth Defense Fleet, Priority 1. Sarah looked up immediately. On screen. The voice that came through was Admiral Singh's. Not an automated relay. Direct. Captain Okafor, this is Admiral Yara Singh, Earth Defense Fleet Command. I need you to listen carefully. Admiral, Sarah said, already sitting straighter. I'm listening. We have credible intelligence of an incoming strike on Meridian Station. Estimated hostile vessel approach. We don't know timing, but it could be within the next hour. The Defiant is 47 minutes out. You are 11 minutes out. I need you to get to Meridian Station and use your shield arrays to provide cover for the personnel on board until the Defiant arrives. Sarah processed this in the 3 seconds it took her to look at her crew, Lena, the helmsman, the navigation officer, the engineer who was watching from the doorway. The Relentless is a civilian transport, she said. We're not armed. Your shields are rated to handle Class 3 energy weapon fire for approximately 22 minutes, Singh said. We need 22 minutes. Sarah looked at her crew. They were looking at her. How many people are on Meridian Station? She asked. 43, Singh said. Including the full tribunal preparation team. Sarah thought about the word authorized. About the word assassination. About standing in the engine room and hearing a 22-year-old kid make the sound of something small breaking. Change of course, she said to her helmsman. Meridian Station. Full burn. Captain, Lena started. I know, Sarah said. Everyone strap in. She got on the ship-wide comm. All hands, this is the captain. We have an emergency situation. I need everyone in a secure position immediately. What we're about to do is going to be rough, and I need everyone to be ready. She paused. I'm not going to tell you this isn't dangerous. It is. But there are 43 people on Meridian Station who need us to be there. So we're going to be there. She looked at the viewport. Ahead, 11 minutes away at full burn, was Meridian Station. A structure she had passed dozens of times on the Proxima run, a small bright point against the dark that she had never thought about as anything other than a navigation waypoint. Until now. Full burn, she said. Let's go. They arrived in 9 minutes. Sarah had pushed the engines beyond their rated tolerance, which was something she had done precisely twice before in her career and which her chief engineer, a solid, quiet man named Kowalski, handled with the focused calm of someone who has spent 30 years in engine rooms and knows the difference between a risk and a mistake. Meridian Station came up on the view screen as they decelerated into approach range. A cylindrical structure about 3 kilometers long, rotating slowly on its axis to generate artificial gravity, its running lights blinking in the steady rhythm she had seen 100 times on the Proxima run. I'm picking up a vessel, her navigation officer said immediately. Bearing 37 Mark IV. Not on the station's traffic log. Pause. It's a Veltari configuration. Medium class. I don't have a weapons reading yet, but... They see us, Lena said. They're adjusting course. Get me a shield status, Sarah said. Full arrays raised, her engineer Kowalski said over the intercom from the engine room. We're at max extension. Coverage will be roughly a 100-meter radius around the station. Move us to coverage position, she said to the helmsman. Between the station and the Veltari vessel. The helmsman, a young woman named Rodriguez, did not hesitate. She moved the Relentless into position with the precise, controlled movements of an excellent pilot, placing the transport ship directly between the Veltari vessel and Meridian Station. Sarah opened a hailing frequency. Unidentified Veltari vessel. This is Captain Sarah Okafor of the civilian transport Relentless. You are approaching Meridian Station in violation of neutral zone protocols. State your designation and intention. No response. The Veltari vessel continued adjusting its course. It was not moving toward the station. It was moving to get around the Relentless. They're maneuvering, Rodriguez said. Match them, Sarah said. Keep us between them and the station. Rodriguez matched. The Valkyrie vessel adjusted again. Rodriguez adjusted again. A slow, careful dance in the dark, two ships circling each other in the silence of space, the station behind them, the stars all around. Captain, Lena said quietly. I've got a weapons charge reading. They're arming. Sarah kept her voice very level. Shields at maximum. All non-essential power to shields. Captain, Rodriguez said, and there was a slight edge in her voice now. I see it, Sarah said. Hold position. She opened the hailing frequency again. Valkyrie vessel, I am a civilian transport with 40 passengers aboard, positioned between you and a neutral zone installation. If you fire on this ship, you are firing on civilians. I need you to stand down. Silence. The weapons charge reading increased. Sarah looked at the view screen and felt, with absolute clarity, the thing that makes a person either move or freeze in the moment when there is nothing left between them and a consequence they cannot control. She had felt it twice before. Once in a debris field off Kepler Station, once in a medical emergency when a passenger had gone into cardiac arrest and she had been the only person on the bridge who had a single day of medical training. She had not frozen either time. She was not going to freeze now. Kowalski, she said. What have you got for me? I can give you an extra 8% on the port shield array if I reroute from the secondary navigation system, he said. We won't be able to make micro adjustments to our position. Do it, she said. Rodriguez, lock our position relative to the station manually. Manual lock engaged, Rodriguez said. Lena, keep that hailing frequency open. Keep talking to them. I don't care if they don't respond, I want them to keep hearing a human voice. What do I say? Lena said. Tell them the Defiant is 38 minutes out, Sarah said. And tell them that if they fire on this ship, those 38 minutes are going to be the longest 38 minutes of their lives. She heard Lena take a breath and begin speaking into the open frequency. Her voice was steady. It was a good steady voice, and Sarah made a note, in some distant corner of her mind that kept filing things away even in crisis, that Lena was going to make a remarkable career out of whatever she chose to do next. The Valkyrie vessel fired. Not at the station. At the Relentless. The hit was a glancing impact. The weapons reading had given them just enough warning that Rodriguez had managed a fractional positional shift, so the energy beam caught the edge of the shield array rather than the center, but the impact was still enormous. The ship shuddered hard, throwing everyone against their harnesses. Lights flickered. The shield display dropped 8% in a single second. Status? Sarah said. Shields at 71%, Kowalski said immediately. Hull integrity solid. No breaches. Rerouting everything I can. They're recharging for a second shot, Lena said. How long? 30 seconds. Maybe less. 30 seconds. Sarah did the math. 30 seconds and then another shot, and if this one hit center they'd lose another 15–20%. Shields at 50%, then another charge, another shot, they wouldn't make it to the Defiant's arrival. But 43 people on Meridian Station would. Signal the station, she said. Tell them to get everyone to the emergency shelter pods on the interior ring. Now. They're moving, Lena confirmed. Station commander confirms everyone is mobilizing. Good. She looked at the view screen at the Valkyrie vessel. Get me a line to Admiral Singh. It took 4 seconds to connect. Then Singh's voice, Okafor, I'm seeing your shield readings. The Defiance EDA? Sarah cut in. 36 minutes. Our shields won't last 36 minutes against sustained fire, Sarah said. It was a calm, factual statement. She was not panicking. She had no time for panic. I need an alternative. Pause. I have a frigate, Singh said. The Ironclad. She can jump to your position in about 20 minutes. She's further out than the Defiant, but she has a Phase 2 drive. 20 minutes. They could last 20 minutes if they were careful. Maybe. Do it, Sarah said. And Admiral? Yes. These people on my ship, they volunteered for none of this. I want that noted. They're passengers and crew, not military. Whatever happens, they should be. I know, Captain, Singh said, and her voice was different in that moment. Not the command voice, not the Admiral voice, but something warmer underneath. I know. The Ironclad is moving now. Hold on. The second shot came. Sarah braced. The Relentless shook. A ceiling panel in the bridge fell. Someone in the back of the ship, a passenger, not crew, screamed once and then stopped, which meant either they were unhurt or someone was with them. Lights went to emergency backup. The shield display dropped to 53%. Hull. Sarah said. Solid, Kowalski said. He sounded winded. We took it on the aft section. It flexed the hull plates but no breach. The secondary drive coupling might be compromised. I'm running diagnostics. Third shot, she said to Lena. Charging, Lena said. 45 seconds this time. Maybe the weapon is cycling slower at sustained fire. 45 seconds. 20 minutes until the ironclad. They're also maneuvering, Rodriguez said. Trying to get an angle around us. I see it, Sarah said. Follow them. Keep us between them and the station. She looked at the manual position lock, which Rodriguez had disengaged to allow the maneuvering. The station was directly behind them, its running lights still steady. In the sensor readout, she could see the personnel moving to the shelter pods. The station showed as a cluster of heat signatures migrating from the outer ring to the interior. 43 people moving towards safety because the Relentless was between them and what was coming. She thought about Daniel Cho, 11 years standing behind someone brilliant and making their work possible. She thought about Elara Voss reading everything because that was the job. She thought about Mrs. Ewan processing volunteer forms with admirable composure. She thought about the word relentless. All right, she said. Let's see how long we can dance. The ironclad arrived in 19 minutes and 40 seconds. In those 19 minutes and 40 seconds, the Relentless took 4 more hits, dropped to 22% shield capacity, lost 2 of her 4 engine pods, and acquired a hull flex in the aft section that Kowalski was actively managing from the engine room, muttering engineering calculations to himself in a continuous, steady stream that somehow managed to be both intensely technical and deeply reassuring. No one on board was seriously hurt. 3 of the ship's 40 passengers were treated for minor injuries from falls during impacts. 1 crew member, a navigation technician named Hero, broke 2 fingers when a console panel shorted and sparked. Lena's voice never wavered on the open frequency. The Valkyrie vessel broke off the moment the ironclad dropped out of Phase 2 jump at close range. A heavily armed EDF frigate was a different calculation than a civilian transport, and whoever was commanding the Valkyrie ship was not a martyr. They jumped to faster than light and were gone. The ironclad locked weapons tracking on the exit vector, but by treaty, could not pursue without authorization. Silence fell over the Meridian approach corridor. Sarah sat in her command chair in a bridge lit by emergency backup lighting, with a damaged ship and a crew that had done something extraordinary, and looked at the sensor readout showing all 43 Meridian station personnel alive and unharmed in their shelter pods. She picked up the comm station. This is Relentless. You can stand down from shelter positions. The threat has been neutralized. You're okay. Pause. Then the station commander's voice, which had a distinct tremor in it that he was clearly trying to control. Captain Okafor. We owe you. I don't even have words. You don't need words, she said. Are all your people safe? All 43, yes. Nobody, a pause. Nobody hurt. The shelter pods are intact, the station is intact. The records are intact. The records. The tribunal evidence. The documentation that was going to be used to prosecute the people who had killed Elara Voss. Good, Sarah said. That's what matters. She leaned back in her command chair and finally, privately, allowed herself one moment of something she did not have a precise name for, not relief exactly and not pride exactly, but something in the space between them. The feeling of a thing being held that might have dropped. Then she looked at her crew. All right, she said. Let's see what we can do about those engine pods. When Daniel Cho received the report from the ironclad's commander that Meridian Station was secure and all personnel were safe, he sat very still for a moment at his desk in Geneva. Then he opened a channel to Admiral Singh. They fired on a civilian vessel, he said. His voice was precise and quiet and entirely dangerously calm. Yes, Singh said. Armed with the intent to destroy an installation and kill 43 people, including members of a tribunal team conducting a lawfully authorized investigation. Yes. Daniel was quiet for 3 seconds. Yara, he said. I need you to put every fleet asset into a ready fire position. Not a signal this time. An actual posture. He paused. And I need you to calculate a strike option on the Valkyrie vessel that fired on the Relentless. It jumped to FTL. Destination unknown, but the vector traces toward the Valkyrie home system. Then I need a strike option on the Valkyrie home system, Daniel said. Another pause. Longer this time. Daniel, Singh said carefully. Are you authorizing? No, he said. Not yet. I need the option. I need the calculation. Because I am going to present the Valkyrie government with a choice, and they need to understand that the alternative I am offering them is real. All right, Singh said. Give me an hour. 40 minutes, Daniel said. He ended the call and sent 3 messages simultaneously. One to Petra on Kaspara 4, briefing her on the Meridian incident and telling her to present a formal protest to the council chair in the morning. One to Kaelvor's secure line, they fired on civilians. This is your government. What are you going to do? One to every human colony governor, full briefing in 2 hours. Secure channel. All of you. Then he pulled up the colonial network feed and watched what was happening across 34 billion people. There was no other word for it, something he had never seen before. Not a protest. Not a demonstration. Not the organized, scheduled expression of collective sentiment that normally characterizes political response. This was more organic than that, more immediate, more widespread. On every colony on Earth itself, people were gathering, in squares, in community halls, outside government buildings, in every open space available. Not because anyone had called them there. Because they needed to be somewhere together. On Earth, the Geneva Plaza was beyond capacity. The crowds had spread to every major city on every continent. In Sao Paulo, in Tokyo, in Lagos, in Mumbai, in Vancouver, screens everywhere, everyone watching the same feeds, connected in the way that a species with 300 years of interstellar communication infrastructure can be connected. On Proxima B, James Okafor was among the 3,000 volunteers who had now been formally processed and were awaiting orders at the Colony Defense Facility, sitting in a converted warehouse with 2,999 other people who were doing the same quiet waiting that soldiers have always done before they're told what comes next. On Kepler Station, Governor Chen had organized a public memorial in the station's central atrium, and it had been attended by everyone on the station. Every single person, over 12,000, filling the space beyond fire code capacity, nobody caring, nobody leaving. On the Deep Space Research Station orbiting Proxima C, a crew of 6 scientists, the most isolated humans in the current colonial network, had gathered in their common room and watched the feeds together, no one speaking, just being together in the particular solidarity of people who cannot be anywhere else but refuse to be alone. Daniel watched it all through the colonial network feed and understood what he was seeing. He had spent 4 days trying to manage this. Trying to contain the momentum, direct it through proper channels, keep it within the structures of law and diplomacy that he believed in. He still believed in them. But what he was watching was no longer something that could be fully contained or managed. 34 billion people were telling him something. They were telling him, we know what this is. We know what it means. And we are not going to let it be treated as less than what it is. He picked up his communicator and called Governor Monroe. Talisha, he said. Activate the volunteer militia. Pause. A very brief pause, the length of a woman who has been waiting 4 days for this and is choosing to receive it calmly. Understood, Monroe said. For what purpose? Defense, he said immediately. Colonial defense, not offensive action. I want them stationed at key infrastructure points, communication arrays, power grids, docking facilities. If what happened at Meridian Station happens anywhere else. It won't, Monroe said. It was not a boast. It was the statement of a woman who was looking at 3,000 very motivated people and calculating what they were capable of. Make sure of it, he said. And Talisha, I need them to be ready for more. Not ordered to do more. Ready. I understand the distinction, she said. We'll be ready. He ended the call. Admiral Singh came back on the line. Strike option calculated, she said. Do you want the full briefing? Yes. She gave it to him. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, and the civilian population impact? At the target selection I've specified, military installations and fleet assets only, civilian impact would be limited. I want to be honest with you. In space warfare, limited is never zero. But the option I'm presenting is the most precise available. Hold it ready, he said. Do not deploy. But make sure the Velthari High Command knows we have it. How do I do that without deploying it? I'm going to tell them, Daniel said. Directly. He opened the high-priority channel to the Velthari High Chancellor's office, the same channel through which the diplomatic denial had been sent, and he composed a message. It was not long. He was past the point of long messages. High Chancellor Drex Vorath. Your government has murdered our leader. Your forces have attacked a civilian vessel and attempted to destroy a lawfully constituted tribunal investigation. We have evidence of your personal authorization of these acts. We are presenting the full evidence package to the Galactic Interstellar Council Tribunal within 24 hours. You have that same 24 hours to make a choice. Surrender yourself and the named individuals to the tribunal. Or face the full weight of humanity. I want you to understand what that means. 34 billion people. A fleet that has been moving toward your border for 4 days. Colonial volunteer forces on every human-settled world. A galactic community that voted 41-6 to hold you accountable. And a people who have survived ice ages and plagues and world wars and the death of their own planet's atmosphere. You killed our leader. You thought that would make us stop. It did the opposite. He sent it. Then he sat back and waited. The response came in 4 hours. Not from Director office. From the Velthari High Command. Not the government. The military command structure. The message was from a general named Velsorin, whose name Daniel did not know but who, when he quickly ran the identity check, turned out to be the commander of the Velthari Defense Force, the equivalent in their system of a Joint Chiefs Chairman. Acting Director General Cho. I am contacting you outside of diplomatic channels because the situation has changed. High Chancellor Director Voss has been removed from office by a vote of the Velthari Council of Ministers, effective 1 hour ago. The Council of Ministers is taking emergency control of the government pending full elections. We are opening communication with the Galactic Interstellar Council Tribunal team. We request a cessation of fleet mobilization toward Velthari space in exchange for our full cooperation with the inquiry. We understand the gravity of what was done. We are asking you to allow the process to work. Daniel read it 3 times. Then he called Petra. Did you see it? He asked. I saw it, she said. Her voice was quiet and very careful. Daniel, Director Voss has been removed. The government collapsed. The Velthari military is asking for talks. I know. It worked, she said. It's working, he corrected. It's not done. Pause. Do you trust it? No, she said. But Calvor does. And I trust him as much as I trust anyone in that building right now. What does your gut say? Pause. It says that when you push hard enough and you have a case that's airtight enough and you have enough people standing behind you, sometimes the wall comes down without anyone having to throw a punch. She paused. But keep the fleet where it is until we see what full cooperation actually means. Already planned, he said. He sent a message to Singh. Hold position. Do not advance. Do not stand down. Hold. Then he drafted a response to General Velsorin. We receive your communication. The fleet will hold its current position pending demonstrated cooperation with the tribunal. Full cooperation means complete evidence access, surrender of named individuals, and full accountability proceedings within 30 days. We will be watching. We are ready to talk. He sent it and leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling of his command center, the same building, the same ceiling, where 4 days ago he had not yet known what had happened and the world had still felt like something he understood. He thought about a cold cup of coffee and a small joke about the best thing about the job. He thought about 34 billion people standing in plazas and warehouses and common rooms across 4-star systems. He thought about a captain of a civilian transport ship who had put her vessel between a threat and 43 lives because someone needed to be there. This is not over, he thought. But this is different than it was yesterday. The Galactic Interstellar Council Accountability Tribunal convened its first formal hearing 22 days after the death of Elara Voss. Petra Ramirez attended as the senior human observer. Calvor attended as a witness, no longer an ambassador, his former role rendered moot by the collapse of the government he had represented, but present nonetheless because he had asked to be and because the tribunal had agreed. Daniel Cho watched from Geneva live feed, in the same command center where he had spent the last 3 weeks running the most exhausting sustained operation of his life. The tribunal was a 3-member panel. 1 judge from the Syrian Confederation whose species had a 2,000-year tradition of dispute resolution that the broader galactic community had adopted as the standard for interstellar legal proceedings. 1 judge from the Karelian Union, a small but respected civilization known for their rigorous approach to evidence standards. And 1 human judge, the Honorable Maria Santos, who had spent 30 years on Earth's Supreme Interstellar Court and had been selected by consensus because even the non-human council members acknowledged that, in a case about the death of humanity's leader, humanity deserved representation on the bench. The 6 individuals named on Calvor's data chip had been surrendered within 48 hours of the new Velthari provisional government's taking power. High Chancellor Director Voss, in what appeared to be a final act of defiance, had not surrendered voluntarily. He had been taken into custody by the Velthari Defense Force on the orders of the new Council of Ministers. He arrived at the tribunal facility on Kaspara 4 in Velthari military custody, escorted by soldiers who treated him with the particular careful formality of people who are delivering something important and distasteful. The three Dravath Syndicate executives named in the authorization communications were a more complicated matter. The Dravath were not a government. They did not have a council of ministers that could be pressured and reorganized. They had lawyers, very good lawyers, an entire phalanx of them, who had immediately filed 17 motions challenging the tribunal's jurisdiction over corporate entities. The tribunal had ruled on all 17 motions in a single session, denying each one with a precision that made clear this was not going to be a venue where legal complexity was used as a shield for moral culpability. The ruling had been 37 pages long and was already being discussed in interstellar legal circles as a landmark document. The Dravath executives had appeared for their first hearing 3 days later, flanked by lawyers who now understood they were in a different kind of fight than they'd anticipated. Daniel watched the opening session from Geneva. He watched Petra sit in the observer's section with the same posture she had used when she had walked alone onto the council floor 3 weeks ago, straight, precise, present. He watched Voss sit in the witness section with the careful stillness of a person who has done an irreversible thing and is at peace with it. He watched the tribunal judges, all 3 of them from 3 different species, with 3 different legal traditions, conduct themselves with the sober, methodical rigor that the moment required. He watched Voss enter the chamber. The former High Chancellor was older than Daniel had expected from the photographs, older looking perhaps than he had been even a month ago, in the way that power stripped away tends to add years very quickly. He moved to the defendant's position without looking at the human observers section. Without looking at Voss. Petra was watching Voss. Daniel could see it in the feed, the particular quality of her attention, the way her eyes tracked him. He sent her a text, "Don't give him the satisfaction." Her response came 30 seconds later, "I'm not looking at him with anger. I'm looking at him with documentation. There's a difference." He almost smiled. The testimony that mattered most came on the 4th day of proceedings, and it came from an unexpected source. One of the 3 Dravath executives, a man named Corvin Sale, who was the youngest of the 3 and had clearly spent the weeks between his surrender and his testimony in serious, private reconsideration of his situation, had requested to testify as a cooperative witness rather than a defendant. His lawyers had advised against it. He had dismissed his lawyers. He stood before the tribunal and gave 5 hours of testimony that disassembled, from the inside, the entire structure of the conspiracy, how it had begun 2 years before Elara Voss's death, as a strategic planning exercise within the Dravath Syndicate's policy division, how the Velthari bloc had been brought in as partners, how the decision to target Voss personally had been made incrementally, each step seeming smaller and more manageable than the whole, how the Vel-9 research had been funded through shell entities that the Dravath Syndicate's legal team had specifically designed to be difficult to trace. He described, in calm and specific terms, the meeting at which the final authorization had been given. Who was present? What was said? What euphemisms were used for what actions? How Voss had signed the authorization document while discussing, in the same conversation, the Velthari Harvest Festival calendar. The chamber was very quiet throughout. At one point, the chief tribunal judge asked Corvin Sale, in the careful, neutral tone of someone whose job is to understand rather than judge, "Why are you telling us this?" Sale was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because I have a daughter. She is 14 years old. She is watching this tribunal from our home world and I cannot." He stopped. Started again. "I cannot have her watch this and believe that the only thing her father did was stay silent." Another silence. The tribunal judge made a note. After the testimony, Daniel received a call from someone he had not expected. Captain Sarah Okafor. The Relentless was being repaired at Meridian Station, a somewhat ironic location for a ship that had spent 20 minutes being shot at trying to protect the place, but the station had the best repair facilities in the sector and the Relentless needed them. Sarah had been there for 2 weeks, supervising the repair work, managing her crew, and fielding a remarkable volume of communications from people across the human colonial network who had seen the news about what the Relentless had done and wanted, in various ways, to express how they felt about it. "Acting Director General Cho," she said when he picked up. "Captain Okafor," he said. "How's the ship?" "About 60%, she said. "Kowalski says she'll be fully spaceworthy within 10 days, which is ahead of schedule, because Kowalski has never met a timeline he couldn't beat." "And the crew?" "Good," she said. And then, in a different tone, "Good in the way that people are good after they've done something that was hard and are not entirely sure how they feel about it yet. But good." Pause. Hero's fingers have healed. The passenger who screamed, "Her name is Mrs. Chin, she's 67, she was going to visit her grandchildren on Proxima B," She brought the whole crew homemade cookies yesterday. From ingredients she found in the ship's emergency rations. How were they? He asked. Surprisingly good, she said. Given the context. He almost laughed. It was the first thing that had been close to a laugh in weeks. I'm calling, she said, because I wanted to say something and I wasn't sure who else to say it to. I've been watching the tribunal. And I've been reading about Director General Voss. I met her once years ago briefly, and I've been thinking about what happened and what's happening and she paused. I wanted you to know that what you're doing is right. The way you're doing it, law first, fleet as a last resort, justice through process, even when it would be faster to do it another way, I think that's what she would have wanted. And I think it's right. And I'm not someone who usually calls government officials to tell them that, but... Daniel was quiet for a moment. Thank you, he said. He meant it without any diplomatic distance. Just meant it. The other thing I wanted to say, she continued, is that whenever you need the relentless again, whatever comes next, we're available. He looked at the tactical display on his desk. The fleet was still at the border, still holding. The Velthari Provisional Government was cooperating with the tribunal. The Dravath Syndicate's legal team had gone very quiet since Corvin Sale's testimony. The colonial volunteer forces were on standby, orderly and ready and so far not needed. I hope we won't, he said. But thank you, Captain. He ended the call and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then he did something he hadn't done in 3 weeks. He went home. Not for long. A few hours. To sleep in his own bed, to change his clothes, to eat something that wasn't from the facility commissary. He went home because he had learned, from 11 years of watching Elara Voss, that the people who are in it for the long run are the people who understand the difference between running toward something and running away from yourself. He slept for 6 hours. He dreamed nothing he could remember. When he came back, there was a message from the tribunal chief judge requesting a summary briefing with human leadership within 48 hours. And a message from the new Velthari Provisional Government requesting a formal dialogue session on the future of Velthari human relations. And a message from 3 non-council species whose leaders had been watching the proceedings and wanted to discuss joining the Galactic Interstellar Council, specifically citing the Voss Accords as the reason they believed the council might now be worth joining. He sat at his desk and read through all of it. Then he made a fresh pot of coffee, waited for it to actually be hot and got back to work. 6 months after the death of Elara Voss, the Accountability Tribunal issued its verdicts. High Chancellor Voss, guilty on all charges including conspiracy to commit assassination of a planetary leader, unauthorized deployment of biochemical weapons, and conspiracy against the Galactic Interstellar Council's judicial process. Sentenced to permanent removal from public office and 25 years in a council-administered facility, the longest sentence in the tribunal's history. The 3 Velthari Science Ministry officials, guilty on charges including development and deployment of prohibited biochemical agents and conspiracy to commit assassination. Sentenced to terms ranging from 12 to 18 years. The Dravath Syndicate executives. 2 of the 3 were found guilty on charges including financial conspiracy, conspiracy to commit assassination, and obstruction of a council investigation. Corvin Sale, who had testified as a cooperative witness, received a reduced sentence with conditions that included full financial disclosure and a mandatory restructuring of the Dravath Syndicate's policy division under council oversight. It was, everyone acknowledged, less than he deserved. It was also, everyone acknowledged, more than they would have had without him. The restructuring proposal, the proposal that had been the catalyst for all of it, the document that had first brought Elara Voss into direct conflict with the people who would kill her, was formally withdrawn from council consideration. In its place, the tribunal issued a supplementary ruling extending the Voss Accords protections and adding 3 additional enforcement mechanisms that had not been in the original document. Petra Ramirez, on the council floor, had fought for those 3 additions for 6 weeks. She got all 3. Daniel Cho watched the verdict session from the command center. He had made the decision not to travel to Caspara 4 for it, partly for security reasons, partly because he felt the tribunal process should belong to the tribunal and not be overshadowed by the presence of human executive leadership. He watched it from Geneva in the same room where this had all begun, on the same screen. When the chief judge read the verdict on Voss, Daniel looked at his desk. At the data chip which he still kept there, Kalevor's chip, the one with the 6 names on it, as a kind of reminder. Not of the crime. Of the chain. A chain that had started with a woman reading a trade report and a cold cup of coffee, and had run through a leak in the middle of the night and a civilian ship that had held position under fire and the steady, exhausting work of building a case within a system that you believe in even when it disappoints you. He picked up the data chip and held it for a moment. Then he put it in his desk drawer and closed it. He called Petra. "How are you feeling?" he said. "Like I've been in a very long fight and I won, and I'm not sure if I'm happy or tired or both," she said. "Both," he said. "Definitely both." Pause. "What happens now?" she said. "The interim leadership period. You've been acting Director General for 6 months. The formal election process." "I know," he said. "I've been thinking about it." And? He thought about it one more time, right there in the conversation. Thought about being a background person, a support person, the one who makes things work from behind. Thought about 11 years of building the structures that allowed someone else to lead. Then he thought about the chain. About what had happened when he had stopped being a support person and had been the person the situation required. "I'm going to put my name forward for Director General," he said. Pause. "Good," Petra said. "I'll second the nomination. Don't you want to think about it?" "I've had 6 months," she said. "I've been watching you think about it. I'm done waiting." He smiled. It was a real smile, the kind that catches you by surprise because you didn't know it was coming. "Thank you, Petra." "Don't thank me," she said. "Just do the job." On Proxima B, in the colony defense facility, James Okafor shook hands with the other volunteers as they stood down from the militia's official activated status. The threat level had been formally downgraded by Colonial Command 3 weeks after the tribunal verdicts. The volunteer militia was returned to reserve status. Nobody was disappointed. There had never been a desire for a fight, only a willingness to show up for one if it was required. The distinction mattered. He went home to his apartment in New Wellington and called Amara. "It's over," he said. "The tribunal part," she said. "The rest is just beginning." "Yeah," he said. "I know." Pause. "How's the new lab?" She had been offered, and accepted, the position of lead researcher at the newly established Galactic Interstellar Biochemical Weapons Research Center, a body created in direct response to the Vel-9 case, whose mandate was to identify, document, and work toward banning every class of undetectable biochemical agent in the known galaxy. It was a 10-year research program. She had started 3 weeks ago. "The lab is good," she said. "The work is enormous. There are compounds in the database that make Vel-9 look simple." Pause. "But it's important work." "The most important," he said. "James, there are 3 new species applying to join the council. Did you see?" "I saw. One of them, the Terra T, they specifically cited the Voss Accords in their application. The original Voss Accords." She paused. "They said, and this was in their official application in writing to the council, they said that they had been watching human civilization for decades and had not believed the council was safe for smaller species. And then they watched the last 6 months and they changed their minds." James was quiet for a moment. "She did that," he said. "Even after." "Yes," Amara said. "Even after." In a small, functional office at the Geneva UAA headquarters, Captain Sarah Okafor sat across from Daniel Cho on a bright Thursday morning. She had come to Geneva for the formal ceremony naming Daniel as the new Director General-elect, which would happen in 3 days. She had been invited by Petra, who had apparently tracked down everyone even tangentially connected to the Meridian incident and made sure they were present for what she called, the part where we acknowledged that it worked. But she had asked for this separate meeting this morning before the ceremony. Just the 2 of them. "I wanted to give you something," she said. She placed a small item on his desk. It was the manual position lock toggle from the Relentless bridge, the actual physical toggle removed from the console during the repair work, kept by Rodriguez and then given to Sarah with the words "give it to someone who should have it." "It's what held us in position," Sarah said. "When they were maneuvering, Rodriguez locked us in manually. That's what made it possible to hold the station." She paused. "I thought you should have it." He looked at it for a moment. A small piece of machined metal, worn from years of use, entirely ordinary looking. "She held position," he said. "She held position," Sarah confirmed. He picked it up, turned it over in his hand. He thought about 34 billion people. About ships holding position. About a single woman standing in front of a proposal that should never have been written, who had read everything because that was the job, who had held her position until the last possible moment and beyond it. He thought about what it means to hold position. "Thank you," he said. He set it next to his coffee mug, the new one, always hot, that Dr. Keene made sure of now because it had somehow become institutional practice. "I'll keep this where I can see it." Sarah nodded. "Good luck," she said. "With the job." "It's a big job," he said. "I know," she said. "You've already been doing it." She stood, shook his hand and left. He sat alone in the office for a moment. Elara's office, his office now or would be in 3 days. The same desk, the same view of the Geneva sky outside the window, the same quiet that settles in a room between one conversation and the next. He picked up his mug. The coffee was hot. He took a sip, set it down, opened his first file of the morning. The job was waiting. 1 year after the death of Elara Voss. The memorial was held on the plaza in Geneva, where the candles had burned for 40 days after her death, where the crowds had gathered without being called, where a species had stood together in the October wind and asked questions that demanded answers. The plaza had been redesigned in the year since. Not demolished and rebuilt, there was no appetite for that kind of erasure. It had been added to. A bronze sculpture at its center now, a woman standing, reading, her head bent over a tablet, her posture neither heroic nor monumental but simply present. Focused. Working. At the base of the sculpture, a simple inscription. She read everything. That was the job. Daniel Cho stood at the podium as Director General. The formal investiture had happened 3 months prior, in a ceremony that he had tried to make as brief as possible and that the public had warmly ignored, showing up in enormous numbers regardless. He had been surprised at the investiture by how many alien dignitaries had attended. Not just the human allied delegations. Non-council species, independent traders, cultural emissaries from civilizations that technically had no formal relationship with human governance at all. She would be embarrassed by this, he said, looking at the sculpture, and a ripple of genuine laughter moved through the crowd, because everyone who had known Elara Voss, and everyone who had read enough about her to feel like they knew her, understood the truth of that. He waited for the laughter to settle. She would be embarrassed, he said again, and then she would read the full design brief for the sculpture in detail, make 3 specific suggestions for improvements, and ask why the coffee station at the edge of the plaza didn't have a better selection. More laughter. Warm. Fond. The particular laughter that is also a way of missing someone. He let it settle again. What I want to talk about today, he said, is not what was done to her. We know what was done. The tribunal established the facts. The accountability followed. That part of the story is written. He paused. What I want to talk about is what she would want us to do with it. He looked out at the crowd. A crowd that was the same in some ways as the crowd that had gathered a year ago. The same grief, the same love, the same faces turned upward, and entirely different in another way. A year is long enough to change the texture of things. She would tell us to keep building, he said. She would tell us to take the momentum, everything that happened in those 6 months, everything that was proven and established and argued and won, and put it to work. She would tell us that justice is a process, not an event. That accountability is a practice, not a verdict. He looked at the sculpture. She would tell us that the Terati applied to join the council because of the Voss Accords. She would say, good, now make sure we're worthy of the trust they're placing in us. She would tell us that 3 new enforcement mechanisms were added to the Accords because of what happened, and she would say, good, now make sure they have teeth. She would tell us that a civilian transport captain held position under fire to protect 43 lives, and she would want to find that captain and have a very long conversation about what the experience was like. A ripple of amusement through the crowd. Sarah Okafor, standing somewhere in the back of the plaza, smiled at the pavement. And she would tell us, he paused. This was the part he had been thinking about for days, the part he had written and rewritten. She would tell us that the most important thing humanity did in the last year was not the tribunal. It was not the fleet mobilization. It was not the diplomatic maneuvering or the vote count or the careful accumulation of evidence. He looked at the crowd. It was the fact that 34 billion people on 9 worlds and 17 settlements and every ship between the stars stood together and said, this is not what we accept. This is not who we are. This is not what is permitted. Silence. 34 billion people, he said, who have never met each other, who come from different countries and different backgrounds and different centuries of human history, who argue with each other constantly about politics and policy and the price of lithium exports and 100 other things that matter and 100 other things that don't, who are, in so many ways, gloriously, chaotically different from each other. He paused. Who, when the moment came, were entirely, perfectly, and unanimously the same. He looked at the sculpture again. At the woman reading, focused, working. She knew that about us, he said. That's why she fought the way she fought. Not because she believed humanity was perfect. Not because she believed any civilization was perfect. But because she believed, she knew, that when you threaten something that 34 billion people love, you do not diminish it. You discover exactly how large it is. He paused for the last time. There is a question that was asked in many places over the past year, as this story became known across the galactic community. The question was, why are humans so difficult to manage? Why don't they stay in the places you put them? Why don't they accept the losses you inflict on them and adjust? Why do they keep coming? I've thought about how to answer that question, he said. And the honest answer is, because we always have. Because that is the thing we are. Ice ages and plagues and world wars and the slow ruin of our own home and the terrifying blank of deep space, we have come through all of it, and we have come through it by refusing to let the hardest moments be the last word. By deciding every single time that what comes next matters. That building continues. That the people we love are worth fighting for not just today but tomorrow and in every year after. He looked out at the crowd. At the plaza. At the bronze woman reading, focused, working. They killed our leader, he said quietly. And humanity unleashed a tempest. He let the silence hold for just a moment. That tempest is not over, he said. It has become something else. Something that will carry her name and her work across decades, across the stars, to species that don't yet exist and negotiations that haven't been imagined and moments of courage that no one has gotten to yet. He stepped back from the podium. Let it carry. Let it echo. He stepped back. The plaza was silent for one long moment. Then it was not. Elsewhere, in the places the tempest had reached. On Proxima B, James Okafor sat in the Colony Defense Office, no longer a volunteer facility, now formalized as a standing colonial security force, with James as its second in command, and watched the memorial on the feed. He thought about the morning he had stood in the market square and heard the word assassination and felt something shift in the air around him. He thought about Mrs. Ewan processing forms with admirable composure. He was going to recommend her for the Colonial Service Commission. She had the right instincts. On the Relentless, 3 weeks out from a supply run to the Kepler Station Outer Ring, Captain Sarah Okafor sat in her command chair and watched the memorial on the ship's main screen with her crew around her. Nobody had suggested gathering for it. Everyone had just shown up. She sat in the middle of them and watched Daniel Cho speak and thought about a manual position lock toggle sitting on a desk in Geneva, next to a cup of hot coffee. In the newly established Galactic Biochemical Research Center, on Caspara 4, Dr. Amara Okafor paused her work for exactly the length of the memorial and then returned to it. The compound she was currently analyzing was not Vel-9. It was something newer, from a different species, potentially more dangerous. It would take months to fully characterize. The work was enormous. She had told her brother, the most important. She had not changed her mind. Ambassador Kaelvor, no longer affiliated with the Velthari government, living in a private capacity in the neutral territories, having been offered asylum by 4 separate civilizations and having chosen, with characteristic precision, the option that gave him the most independence, watched the memorial from his small apartment on the station where Elara Voss had died. He watched it in silence, and at the end of it, he turned off the screen and sat in the quiet and thought, as he had thought every day for a year, that he should have warned her more specifically. That he should have found a way to say it clearly enough that she would have taken precautions. That the warning he gave was insufficient for what was coming. He thought this every day. He had decided, after several months of carrying it, that the weight of it was his to keep. Not as punishment. As responsibility. As a reminder that insufficient action is still action, that the choice to soften a warning has consequences, and that he would not make that choice again. He would live with what it cost. And he would keep acting on what it taught him. 34 billion people, across 9 worlds and 17 settlements and every ship between the stars, went on with their days. Went to their jobs and their schools and their farms and their research stations and their ships. Argued about politics and policy and the price of lithium exports. Loved each other in the imperfect, complicated, completely genuine way that humans have always loved each other. Built things. The way they always had. The way they always would. The Tempest had started in grief and moved through anger and arrived at something that had no tidy name, not peace, not justice exactly, but something that was the shape of both, something that had the structure of a world that had been tested and found out what it was made of. They killed Earth's leader. They thought it would make us stop. It did the opposite. The stars burned steadily across distances that made every human life feel small. And across those distances, in ways that the Velthari bloc and the Dravath Syndicate and every careful, calculating enemy had never understood and would spend the next century trying to understand, the echo of what humanity had done traveled outward. Not as a warning. As a story. And stories, when they are true, when they are built from the actual substance of what people do when they are tested, do not diminish with distance. They grow. In the great chamber of the Galactic Interstellar Council, 6 months after the memorial, when the Terra-T delegation formally took their seats as the 48th member civilization, their ambassador, a small, bioluminescent being named Velasha, who had spent 20 years studying human history before making this recommendation to her people, looked at Petra Ramirez, who was sitting in the human delegation section in Elara Voss's former seat. She said in the careful, respectful human influence dialect she had practiced, "We are glad to be here." Petra looked at her. At the newest member of a community that was slowly, imperfectly, through argument and grief and stubbornness and the occasional act of extraordinary courage, becoming what Elara Voss had always believed it could be. "So are we," Petra said. "Welcome." And